Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome to part 2 of my raw techno file Ableton template explanation. Basically, this template I've been creating live during my live stream session on this channel. It's every 2 Monday and I basically create a track from scratch. You can come around, participate, ask questions. And last week I talked about more all the individual elements, the MIDI, and today we're gonna talk a bit more about the track idea, how it came, the arrangement, mixing and mastering. Alright, so let's go into Ableton, let's have a listen how it sounds. So before to jump into the arrangement, I'd like to talk about the track ID, how the ID came and how things goes around. So because I'm doing this live, I always experiment a lot, but usually I always start with the drum and at least the kick drum and the bass. And that's how the ID started. And I wanted to really have a kind of a weird bass line. Like no weird, but different. And I have this kind of very bubbly kind of bass line. And then after... So that was kind of the first idea, like the groove. And then I have to find obviously like kind of a hook or a good melody or good element to carry on the track. So then again, it's experimenting and I came up with this chord, which sounds like this. Where I explained last week that the length of the chords, it's really helping the groove. So that was my main hook idea, and that I decided to carry on the whole track. And obviously once I had this, I have to build other things around. So I built the drums, and then I add some percussion, like some are more for the background. I talked about this last week, but I'll just explain you quick. And then some ear candy, which are like little notes here and there, and then I add SFX. And so that's how came the idea. Now the arrangement, usually I like to do like kind of A, B and A plus B part, which means like I will have a part of the track, which I call part A, with, for example, with the main hook, and then after I will have a part B where I don't have the main hook, but I have another element to kind of take a break from the part A and the main hook, and then after I bring back the main element, and I often play it as well with some of the elements that I will play in part B, so that's why I call like part A plus B. Here it's a bit similar, so you can see I've done this here to help you understand, but you will have the first part where obviously you have the main lead playing, and here what I've done is I still decided to kind of, this part 2 is kind of part 1 extended, so at the end of part 1 I will have a very groovy thing, and then I make a break, and what I do is I make the break and I jump into again the similar part but with less drum, and I build again the drum, but I build them in a different way and with different drum. You can see there is no ride and clap and there is the top loop, and then after I have another break, and then I have the part 3, which what I was talking like when I get rid of the main hook, though you can hear. Here is the part where I don't have the main hook, so that's my part B, let's say. And then after I have this part 4, which is part A plus B, so with the main hook and with element from this part here as well, like for example the top percussion, and then the break and the outro. So that was the global arrangement idea. So you can see for this type of track, I like to actually start the arrangement in the session view. So I start to build a main global idea of the arrangement here, and then after I just press record and play each scene one after the other, and that's how it results in this arrangement. This you can go on the live stream, there is still up. You can see I do this live and you can check how I did. And then after obviously it's like final details. Some of the part I shorten them, some of them I make them longer. But so let's go over the arrangement part by part. We're gonna start with the intro. That's usually the part where you don't have that many elements. You mainly have the groove, kick bass and some ambient sound. So here you have this pad. You have some perk. Main perk, and then you start to slowly introduce drums. So the close hi-hat, I have some SFX playing here and there, up, then introducing more drum, the open hat, and I have this ear candy coming as well slowly with a low pass filter. Then I bring the ride. So it's already a pretty, this part, you could almost call it like a pre-part one, because it's already pretty groovy. You have a lot of drums playing, it's quite driving, you have quite some element. You still don't really have the main element. I mean, it's quite like a low filter still. But you can hear is the part where we're gonna start to open it, and then after we're gonna enter into the break. So yeah, basically the intro is kind of the intro of the track for the DJ, but it's also like the introduction of your main element, to slowly introduce your main element, and then you have the break where you kind of present your main element to the listener. And the idea is to kind of then, during this break, to kind of build some tension, to then after have a drop and have a very energetic moment. So that's the idea of the break. Now, to get into the break, one of the difficulties sometimes is like it's pretty abrupt to go from before the break into the break, because you remove a lot of elements. So a few tips I can give you. This obviously is case by case, each track is different, but it's great to don't remove everything straight up. You can see first I get rid of the ride and the bass, then I get rid of the other element. Yeah, that can help. I have some SFX as well that I talked about it last week that are playing just before the transition, which help. Which gonna I have this, and I also have this track, which is basically my whole mix, which I send into a return, which kind of with a washout effect, which is gonna kind of create a very noisy tail. So you can hear it from here, like a noisy tail fading out. So that's help the transition. Alright, so that was the first part of the break, kind of getting rid of everything, making a smooth transition. And then the second part is more like building the tension. So you do that by, for example, with your main element, which is our chord here, I will open the filter. That's a classic way, but that always works. I also have this riser rack on my master effect, which is a washout effect. So it's gonna be a lot of delay and reverb, and you kind of get this elevating feeling. Let me show you how. If I exactly... You see, it's kind of a DJ effect that I like to use. I like to use it gently. It's just to kind of feeling this impression and this feeling of elevation, rising, building tension. Yeah, that goes up, and then the two last bar, you bring everything down, and then you drop the sound, and that's usually work perfectly. So for this part one, that's where you're gonna have so your main element modulating a lot. You can see there is a lot of modulation with the filter and the filter envelope. This allows me to kind of make it longer, like making it a bit brighter. Really make the main lead change a lot. This I record it live basically. Once I have put down the arrangement, I just press record and I record the whole automation live while the track was playing. I like to do that. And so just this is gonna just evolve along the track. Is the main lead important, because if you leave it static and the same on all the track, you're gonna get bored very quick. So the idea is to always make it move, to always make it evolve and change. So like this, you don't really get bored even if you hear the same chord and pattern the whole track. And then starting from that, you're gonna add some drums to make it a bit more driving. So we're first gonna have the ride playing with open hat. So we had a very driving moment, then we kind of, it's still grooving obviously, but we have a less driving moment where I will have the clap playing every 2 beats. I have this shaker. So I wouldn't say less groovy, but it's just a different type of groove. So that's allowed to bring some variation into your track, because keep in mind that it's always the same chord playing the whole track, the same pattern. So I just add some variation. And that's help because you have ear candies, which are these kind of notes which are like randomly left, right, playing here and there. You have also the SFX I just showed you before, like this kind of weird sounding. they are playing, you see, a bit kind of randomly. This is the same as something I recorded live when I played the whole track and I pressed record and I was just playing like different chord here and there randomly. And then you have this SFX as well that happen every 8 bar that will play. And then we go into breaks 2. So now the idea was to have, now that we created kind of this momentum with a lot of drums and energy, was to kind of make a transition from something very energetic and very rich in harmonics and in drums to going down to something more quieter and with less element. And this difference in dynamic, that's usually work well, and that's something that I like to do. So that's what this break 2 was gonna allow, and we're gonna get into part 2 where you're gonna have way less elements, so you can see we get rid of all of the drum. I'm gonna play from here, so like this you're gonna really hear the transition between something super energetic, we have the break, and then going into something very low energy. But even though it's low energy, because of the change of dynamic, it's still very powerful. So here again, I've done the trick of not getting rid of everything straight up, you know, first the kick and bass and then the drum. And you can see we start again kind of from the beginning. Like you see, it's the main starting down here, except you don't have the perk one. And again, we're gonna bring back the drum. Here the idea is to bring back the drum in a different way, in a different order than what we already did, because you don't wanna repeat basically part 1 here at part 2. So that's why I like to play with drum. You can see in the part 1 I didn't play it with the closer hat, and here I'm gonna introduce the closer hat and open hat, and then the shaker, where here I introduced the open hat, the ride and the clap. So different drum arrangement. It's nice because it's kind of something never heard, even though it's the same chord. And I will add later on as well this top loop, which is going to accentuate this driving effect. This top loop is kind of to have an alternative to the ride, where it's usually the ride is very driving. Here it's a very top loop driving, so that's cool. Yeah. So that. And again, because we have this chord always changing, modulating, you don't really get bored. Alright, then we enter in break 3. So here is the moment of the track where we listen to this chord a lot, and to don't get tired and to don't get the track boring, we need to take a break a little bit from this chord. We need to kind of muffle it or like do something else. That's why we have a break 3 to help this transition between the part of the track where the chord is playing and the part of the track where the chord is not playing. So remember I was talking about part A, part B. Here's the transition between part A and part B. So again, for the break, I like same trick than I did before. First I get rid of the kick here, after I get rid of the bass and then of the drums, and then building the moment and dropping. Here, to get rid of the main chord, I just lower the filter, so it's gonna be a more muffled sound. I bring back the percussion one. You can see FX1 is back, this kind of stuff that was not before, and I stop a little bit this with SFX because I felt as well it was like kind of starting to be too much. So yeah. And again, here where it's working is because you have a very big change in dynamic. You go from something very loud, very busy in the mix with all of the drums, and then you go into something with no drum, and then even the filter of your main chord lead element is muffled. So yeah, big change in dynamic that work. So then it's gonna be like this. All our part 3, we're gonna add open hat, and then you're gonna see that we bring back the main chord. So like that's where part 4 is gonna be. Like, you remember what I told you, like being part A plus B, so the part basically 1, 2 plus the part 3 kind of all together, where kind of everything, all the elements, they're gonna play together. You can see all the drums are playing, all the percs are playing, kind of big momentum of the track before the end. So yeah, bringing back the main lead. then we bring the ride for this extra drivingness, like really like this, the momentum of the track, like the busiest, the driviest. And then we continue like this until the break 4, which is kind of the final break, which is gonna have to transition between so this busiest moment with the outro, where we're gonna slowly starting to get rid of all of the element. So in the break 4, you can see like the chord, we're gonna bring down the low pass filter, we're gonna start to get rid slowly of the elements, so the ride. So for this break, I decided to keep the bass. It was sounding good, because it's the outro, so I didn't want it to be too abrupt. Then you can see gradually getting rid of everything. That's what I like to do, because like this is smooth and filter goes up one last time, and then we'll bring down. Slowly we start to get rid of all of the drum and everything, all the element, classic kind of outro until the end. And yeah, that's pretty much it with the arrangement. It's really worked because the chord is quite a strong hook, so it can be carried on almost the whole track without getting boring too much. Now let's talk about a little bit the modulation, variation, automation. Here was very important. Like I said, this main chord it's playing the whole track, and if you don't modulate it, obviously you're gonna get bored very quick. So that's what I've done here with the sound, and I'm modulating the filter amount and the filter, which both gonna affect the sound in an interesting way. Like the filter amount, it's more like kind of like if you was opening the filter, and actually the filter frequency kind of act as a decay. I feel like when I open it, it makes it a little bit longer, obviously brighter, but also longer. So yeah, I play with the whole track, and that's what keep the scent very interesting. Few other automation I've done as well. I've done this one on the ride, which is I wanted to show you. I play with the pitch at the beginning and at the end the ride is playing. I have basically a pitch up and pitch down. So pitch up for the fade in and pitch down to get out. And that's an interesting way to introduce your ride. When it starts and when it finish, kind of pitch down, like a kind of like a turntable effect. That works pretty great to transition, like for example here into the break, you're gonna hear. I just like it. And then I have some automation which are more like mixing, like for example here on the auto filter, for example on the main element, which is gonna be used more like to introduce the sound, because I was feeling like the thing is when you modulate like this, sometimes for the intro it's kind of too abrupt. And I need an extra low pass filter to really kind of smoothen the intro. So that's what I've done here. And I've done it for the ear candies as well, where you can hear, here you have a low pass filter here, which is playing here at the intro, just to introduce the sound in a smoother way. And then I have some automation, so sending my whole master to the return washout effect, and for the riser as well during the break, like the DJ washout effect. And I also have a EQ8 low cut as well playing. Usually that helps the transition, it's just before to adding a new element, you add this low cut. I mean, adding a new element or changing into a different like a part or sub part of your track, does work well. Just when you do a changement, it's great to do that just a bar or 2 bar before doing the changement. A little low cuts work well. Yeah, then you have element like this feather flanger on the perk, which is gonna, because of the LFO, kind of automatically make automation and things evolve. You see it's kind of changing the flanger. You get this kind of sweeping effect. You have it as well on the chord as well on the stereo. I talked about it last week, but you can see here you have as well the same flanger. This is pretty great. I like to use autopan as well. When it's percussion, like to randomly make it a bit more like the percussion hit on the left, right, middle, like a little bit like randomly along the track, make it kind of play at different parts. Sometimes I do it depend on the sound. So when it's percussion, it's more like a random like this there. if it's like, for example, a pad or a synth, sometimes I like to, or noise, I like to have a kind of more like a sine LFO. So it's like slowly moving around your head. That's something I can recommend as well, to add a bit of movement to your sound. See here, I have a LFO with a solo sine wave, which is like modulating the delay on the perk. So sometimes you're gonna have a lot of delay, sometimes no. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I didn't have that many modulation variations except on the main element. Then I've done a bit of variation. I showed last week on the close hi-hat where like at the end of 2 bar I have like kind of a different pattern, kind of fit drum fill. But yeah, it's always the same with automation, modulation. It's always tricky because you want to do a lot, but then sometimes it's too much and you don't really hear nothing. So it's always a bit hard to find the right balance between having done enough to make things change, but not too much to don't be after too like complicated or too messy. All right, now let's talk about mixing. So if you're familiar with my video, you know what I'm gonna say. Like basically, I like to mix as I create, or I like to, like I said, for me, mixing in electronic music and in techno especially, it's like 90% is done with your sound selection. So making sure you pick up the right sample that goes well together. Making sure like every time you add a new element, it doesn't mask another element, because one of the mistakes we tend to do is we add an element and we add another one, but it's on kind of the same frequency range. So everything starts to masking each other and we start to have so many layers that overlap each other, and that can be a problem. Whether when you are sure that when you add a new element, it's as a space that is not already occupied, usually it makes your life easier. It's tricky, to be honest, but it's worse because then it's easier to mix. That can happen. Obviously, sometimes you're gonna have elements playing at the same frequency range, so you have to maybe do a bit more surgical EQ, maybe pan them differently. But it's not only about the frequency range, but it's also about the fact that some sound fit well together better than other. And that's the best example for that is the kick and bass, how sometimes you will have a nice bass line and you can just swap kick and you will see how some kick react better to a bass line than other kick. And even one kick you will think like, oh, this kick is better than the other one, but on the end the bad kick was gonna sound better with this bass line. So yeah, sound selection is 90%. Once you have that, I like to do that. I like to, every time I add a new element, making sure it's at the right volume, at the right place, making sure that it fit the mix, like it fits the rest, it doesn't feel right, wrong or weird. Adding the right amount of reverb already, and so that's why you will see a lot of reverb in insert, because for example I will have my kick and then I will add a hat and I will straight up put a bit of reverb, making sure it's at the right volume, and then I goes into the open hats, do the same, add a bit of reverb, making sure it's at the right volume. My kick, same as well with the rumble and everything, making sure it's at the right volume. That can happen. Sometimes I have decision that I will take after. For example, for this track especially, the kick until the end, until the mixing was like this, and it's just on the end that I say, okay, actually I think the kick missed a bit of punch, so I'm gonna add this saturator which is making a bit punchier and more like louder in the front. So that can happen, obviously. I'm not gonna say the opposite. And you can see that I don't have neither too crazy, and you can see that I don't have like crazy processing. It's just most of the time reverb, maybe a bit of saturation. Delay is gonna add a bit of groove. So yeah, the tips I can give you with delay and reverb. Sometimes when you mix is too muddy and you don't really know where it's from, try to maybe reduce a little bit the delay dry wet or the delay feedback. Same with the reverb decay or the reverb dry wet or the diffuse. Kind of reducing this gonna make them smaller, which is gonna leave more space, but it's always tricky because when you do that you might lose the character of your sound. So for example, you can see here the delay is at 40%, feedback 40%, which is quite a lot, to be honest. Usually I stay around 30%, but because of this particular track for this sound I needed a longer delay with more dry wet, then I put more. But yeah, this high pitch, this is like the resonance from the ride, boosting the mid-high to make the ride lighter, brighter. And then this sidechain, I tend to sidechain a lot. I have this sidechain rack, put it in the description. It's just like a volume ducking effect and a bit of reverb. EQ, when I use EQ, obviously I will cut everything which is unnecessary and I will boost the frequency I feel like will help this particular sound to kind of pop up in the mix. But sometimes if you feel like you don't need EQ, don't EQ. But you can see some of the track you don't have EQ. You see like you don't have EQ here. It's just delay, reverb, frequency shifter to make the sound a little bit weird. But yeah, even on the bass I don't even have like EQ. I have a low pass filter, I have the sidechain, but that's it. And yeah, you can see like no damage EQ. The low pass filter here is like just to introduce the sound, so it really depends. it depends how busy is your track. Sometimes I will put a lot of EQ, sometimes no. And another thing that is often overlooked because we think, oh, it's just volume. But having things at the right volume, it's crazy how it's helped the mix. And it's obviously very hard because you need experience to kind of train you here to be able to put it at the right volume. But yeah, I will emphasize more on this than on the EQ, because once you get your volume right, then you don't have much to do. All right, now let's talk about mastering. So this, I will call it homemade mastering. I'm calling it homemade mastering because I will always advise you to have someone make you master for different reasons. Probably because first, they have a better room treated to deal with. They have more experience because they do that on the daily basis. It's also a fresh pair of ears, so they will hear things that you won't because you work so much on the track. So they will say, oh, okay, this is missing something that you wouldn't have seen or see because you work so much on the track that you are kind of blinded. But I still reckon that it's good to know a little bit, few basics, at least to make kind of, like I said, a homemade master that can be helpful to have an idea how your track will sound if it was master. If you want to try your track into a club or in the festival and you want to have it as a louder version, it's a great thing to have a bit of basic knowledge into mastering. So when I was doing my template, I was kind of always using the same effect chain, and I decided to make a rack. So I reckon it's not like the perfect way because it's like kind of pre-made effect and each master is different, but it's my go-to chain. I know I just need to tweak a few macro and I have a decent master because anyway, the real master I want to be done by someone else. I don't need to bother too much about my mastering chain. I have something that works, makes the sound louder, brighter, more stereo. So yeah, this rack, I made a video about it and I will show you what I've done here. So first we have some glue compression. Just to make everything a little bit more glue, I try to be between 0 and 6 dB of reduction. Then it depends of the track, obviously. One thing that is important is that you filter what's gonna trigger the compressor. The reason being that if you don't do that, basically the loudest part and the part of your track which has the most energy is the low end kick bass, and so that's what's gonna trigger your compressor, and then that's what's gonna be compressed. And you don't really want that. You want more like a global compression, so that's why you put a low cut on what's gonna trigger your compressor. So this way it's more like the other peaks here and there that's gonna be catch and it's gonna be more like glued together. Then usually I have always the same setting, flow attack around 30 milliseconds. Release usually it depends on the track, but here I left it there. And the ratio at 4 as well. And then I have mapped the threshold and the makeup gain. So this again is depend the track, how much compression you want to add. My setting for that obviously is louder. Then I have this EQ. So this is a very gentle EQ with a fusing map. So you will have, for example, a boost here in the bass. If I go to the maximum, usually I try to be very gentle. So you see here it's not even a dB of gain. You will have a low cut set by default. This is like corresponding to this mud part, which is you can decide, you can sweep. If it's at the minimum, you don't have this this bell cut, but if you decide to put it, you can put it where you want. This is like usually you often have a part around that zone where it's a bit muddier, so that's why I put it. But sometimes I don't use it, but here for the track, yes. And then after I will have like this point here, which the gain is map. So like this, I can have like some boost in the clarity, like this. It's at 1 kilo, 3 kilohertz. I found this frequency are great to boost. So it's kind of fixed frequency, which can sound weird because sometimes it's not exactly there. But keep in mind that it's a very like mastering. It's a very light master, so you don't need to overcomplicate yourself. And yeah. That allow me to rebalance a little bit. You have as well this air bass, which is the corpus preset that I made, which just was gonna add some resonance in the low end, and again it's controlled with the bass boost, so just to boost everything. All right, then we have this channel EQ, which is gonna be more like a boost in the mid-high to kind of make it the sound a bit brighter and more airy. Then we have this utility and EQ8, which are more like to kind of add stereo or more like emphasis the stereo. It's very hard with Ableton device to add stereo like this, so it's kind of the only way I found. It's very subtle and gentle because obviously it's just kind of enhanced if the stereo is already there. So it's depend on the track, but yeah, it's a little bit. Then you have everything under 80 Hz in mono. Then I have two saturators. Actually, I didn't use them this time. They are controlled by this macro. I use this color limiter though. It's not really... I mean, it's barely limiting, but I use it more like for the saturation and the color. I don't know, somehow this device makes the sound a bit more warmer, a bit more full, a bit more depth. I don't know, maybe it's just me tripping, but that's how I feel like. And then you have two limiter, it's just to be like, instead of having like one limiter doing the big limiting, you have two smaller, softer, so... And yeah, you have a good homemade mastering. You have an idea how your track is sounding, a bit more louder and like a bit more like kind of mastering. Obviously, the master engineer would always do a better job, but at least you have an idea how your tracks sound. And that's pretty much it. Hope you liked this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to support me, you can grab the template, the link in the description, and see you next time for another video. Bye bye.